7 Men's Stories Exciting Entertainment.
The Hinterkaifeck Case, The Eerie Farmhouse Murders. Chapter 1, A Remote Farm in Bavaria. In the year 1922, the village of Hinterkaifeck was little more than a speck on the map, hidden away between dense forests and sprawling fields in the heart of Bavaria. The Gruber family's farm was isolated, far from any neighbors, surrounded by an almost unsettling silence. This seclusion made the farm both a refuge and a place of isolation. The Gruber family, Andreas, his wife Kazilia, their daughter Victoria, and her 2 children, also named Kazilia and Joseph, lived a simple but solitary life. The farmhouse was old, with creaking wood floors and walls that seemed to hold secrets. The only sounds breaking the silence were the occasional mooing of cows or the distant rustling of the forest. But in the days leading up to the horrific events, strange occurrences began to unsettle the family's sense of security. Chapter 2, Ominous Signs. It started with an unusual discovery. Andreas Gruber found footprints in the snow leading from the nearby forest directly to the house, yet there were no footprints returning to the woods. This alone was enough to cause concern, but it didn't stop there. At night, the family heard strange noises coming from the attic, as if someone was moving around above them. Then, Andreas found a newspaper inside the house that no one in the family had brought in, and no one in the village recognized. Despite these eerie signs, Andreas Gruber was a tough man, hardened by years of farm life, and he didn't see any reason to panic. However, neighbors noticed he was becoming more withdrawn and anxious. When one of the house keys went missing, it seemed as though a dark cloud was settling over the Gruber family. Chapter 3, The Night of Horror. March 31, 1922, began like any other day on the farm. The Grubers went about their daily tasks, feeding the animals, tending to the land. But by evening, something happened that would plunge the family into darkness. It's believed the killer lured the family members one by one into the barn by calling them out individually. There, the murderer struck them down with a heavy farm tool, brutally killing each without the others being alerted. First, Andreas Gruber was killed, followed by his wife Kazilia, then Victoria, and finally, little Kazilia. The young girl, as it was later discovered, had survived for several hours after the attack, lying next to the bodies of her mother and grandparents, desperately pulling out tufts of her own hair in terror. The murderer didn't spare the maid, Maria Baumgartner, who had just started working at the farm the day before. She was killed in her bed, as was 2-year-old Joseph, who was still in his cradle. Chapter 4, The Discovery of the Crime. It took 4 days for the outside world to learn of the crime. During that time, the killer may have remained on the farm, feeding the animals and sleeping in the victims' beds. It wasn't until the villagers noticed the Grubers hadn't been seen for days and that young Kazilia hadn't attended school, that they decided to check on the family. What they found was beyond their worst nightmares. Led by Joseph Mayer, the villagers entered the barn and were met with a gruesome scene. The bodies were stacked on top of each other and partially covered with straw. It was a sight that left even the most hardened villagers in shock. Inside the house, they found the bodies of Maria Baumgartner and little Joseph, who had been murdered in the same brutal manner. Chapter 5, The Investigation. The Munich police were immediately called in, but the investigation was hampered from the start. The crime scene had been disturbed by the villagers, making it difficult to gather evidence. Despite this, the investigators found clues suggesting the killer had stayed on the farm for some time after the murders. The animals were tended to, and fresh food had been prepared. It was clear that the killer hadn't been in a hurry to leave. Many suspects were questioned, including Karl Gabriel, Victoria's supposedly deceased husband, who was rumored to have survived World War I and returned for revenge. However, this theory, like many others, was never proven. The idea of a robbery was quickly dismissed since no valuables were missing from the house. Chapter 6, Dark Secrets. As the investigation dragged on, rumors began to spread throughout the village. Stories of dark family secrets surfaced, suggesting Andreas Gruber was a strict and tyrannical patriarch who ruled his family with an iron fist. There were even whispers of an incestuous relationship between Andreas and his daughter Victoria, which could have fueled the killer's rage. Despite the police's best efforts, the case went cold. Even attempts to solve the mystery through seances and spiritual mediums yielded no results. The murders at Hinterkaifeck remained an unsolved mystery, haunting those who lived in the village long after the farmhouse was demolished in 1923. Chapter 7: The Legacy of an Unsolved Crime. The Hinterkaifeck case has etched itself deeply into the annals of crime history and remains one of Germany's most puzzling unsolved murders. Historians, criminologists, and true crime enthusiasts continue to pore over the details, hoping to uncover the truth. But the trail has long gone cold, and the last witnesses have taken their secrets to the grave. The question of what really happened on that isolated farmstead and who silenced the Gruber family in that cold March night remains unanswered. The Hinterkaifeck case is a chilling reminder that some mysteries may never be solved, and that sometimes, evil lurks closer than we might ever imagine.
Feel free to follow this channel to avoid missing any new content. Disclaimer: the images are AI generated and are for illustration purposes. The stories on this channel are researched to the best of our knowledge.